Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people who are making the lives of others better locally, globally, and digitally. We are part of Rotary International, well over 1 million people in 36,000 clubs, all dedicated to service above self, the joy and meaning that come from helping others, and doing so as part of a group of people that you just enjoy hanging out with. They're people who inspire you and energize you and remind you that the doom we sometimes encounter in the news is not necessarily that which defines us. Speaking of balancing out the doom we encounter in the news, boy, do we have a good one for you today from UC Berkeley, the flagship school of the University of California system, and the Greater Good Science Center that's a part of Berkeley. The speaker is Kia Afcari. He has been working in this space for over 20 years and is going to tell us a little bit about the Greater Good Science Center and their work to make workplaces all the better as a function of the work and research that is done as a part of the center. Kia, what a pleasure to have you. I welcome you to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley and hand the mic to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rustin. Really appreciate it. And such a pleasure to be speaking to the Rotary clubs and all the folks from around the world. So I'm just going to share my screen here. I got just a quick presentation and would love to chat more with you all. So I'm with the Greater Good Science Center and been around about 20 years. About 1 million people per month come to our website for articles and podcasts about the science of a meaningful life around kindness, compassion, happiness. We have a happiness course that almost 1 million people took. So the Greater Good is a part of UC Berkeley, and our job is really to translate the science of these things and really present them to the world. And so as I mentioned, we've got our Greater Good magazine, online magazine, which lots of people from around the world connect with. We've got a Science of Happiness podcast, which is great. There are 8-minute podcasts all the way to 20-minute podcasts around the science of happiness. And we have lots of events set up for all kinds of groups, from educators to workplaces, to folks who are interested in bridging differences. Okay, so just a couple of things I want to share with you today. This is something I've been kind of obsessed with, answering this question, which is, do nice people and nice companies really finish last? And to answer this question, I really kind of delved into the research, because that's what we do, is we really connect with the research on these things. And I found this guy, Dennis Ring, who is one of the founders of the Whole Foods 365 brand. He kind of made that happen. And also started a little chocolate company called Ocho Chocolates. Here he is with some of his workers. And so I found him as a CEO, and I also found a bunch of scientists who are really focused on this question around kind workplaces and kind leaders. So just starting at the top, we wanted to ask, do companies with kind CEOs, do they actually perform better financially? This was sort of the question we had in our minds. And we found these two professors of accounting, Mei Feng and Wei Lizhe, and they have an incredible article about prosocial CEOs and firm value. So these are accountants who care a lot about making sure that people are actually profitable. And they wanted to answer this question about prosocial CEOs. Now, prosocial really means any kind of act that is helping another person, that's really intended to benefit others. So kindness is a subset of what we mean by prosocial. So in their study, they looked at 3,548 CEOs between 1992 and 2018. And they first wanted to find out which of these CEOs can we consider as pro-social. And so the first measure of that is, do they give their time and money to charitable causes outside of the company? And so that was one sort of filter on whether you're a kind or pro-social CEO. And then the second filter was really analyzing their earnings calls and just seeing when the company's doing well, do they credit their team? And if the company's doing poorly, do they really take it on themselves? Do they have less self-centered speech patterns? So that was sort of the second filter. And then they really looked at profitability, very, deep analysis of profitability. And it turns out, yes, pro-social CEOs have higher firm value and lower risk, most probably because they have employee-friendly policies, customer satisfaction, lower risk. And so this really bore out in the results, looking across all these thousands of CEOs. The next question we wanted to ask is, okay, we started with the CEOs. What about the next layer down? How about managers? Do pro-social managers make a difference? And this research by these two researchers from all over the world, one from Milan and one from Cologne, looked at 900 firms across various industries. And they really found that, yes, employees exert more effort under pro-social managers, and they are inspired by their empathy and thoughtful decisions, which really suggests that pro-social managers can really improve employee engagement and really get folks to really jump in and move that extra effort towards the work we're trying to do. And then lastly, we wanted to go down to the level of individual contributors. Before we did that, we looked at Martha Crowley's work. Again, this really bears out what we just learned in the last slide. In her study of 263 studies, so this is a meta-analysis, she looked at 263 studies with 1.4 million employees in 192 firms, and really found, again, that employees go above and beyond when they have a pro-social manager. And then lastly, let's look at helping behavior between employees, pro-social behaviors between employees. Nathan Podaskoff really looked at this deeply. He's really a leader in this space. And he found that employees engage in more what we call organizational citizenship behaviors. These are behaviors where you're just helping each other out, and it's not necessarily connected to your moving up in the organization. It's just helping behaviors. And so, of course, organizations that have higher organizational citizenship behaviors tend to have better performance evaluations, higher performance bonuses, and more engaged employees. And those companies show higher productivity, efficiency, customer satisfaction, and lower turnover. So it turns out that nice companies don't necessarily finish last, and that there is a real path to profitability and performance when you have leaders that are kind, when you have managers that are pro-social, and when you have employees that are helping each other out. And so, yes, the kind of big takeaway is be excellent to each other, because it actually does affect the performance of your organization. Okay, there you have it. That's a little presentation, and happy to answer any questions you have about pro-social organizations or the Greater Good Science Center in general.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Kia. I'd like to introduce the group that we've got, and then we'll dive directly into those questions. So as I call your name, go ahead and wave at the camera. From our club, Ernie Rodriguez in Southern California. Here in Northern California, Shags Shagrin. Our president, Mike Kane in the Sacramento area. Honorary member and member of the Rotary Club of Eugene Metropolitan. Friend of the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley, Heather Edwards. My name's Rushton. I'm in San Jose. And Kia, you started by talking about pro-social and that kindness is a subset of pro-social in that sense. Can you talk about some of the other subsets? Like how can we think about kindness as this element of this larger thing that you look at?
Sure, it's a great question, Rushton. Yeah, prosociality is a very broad sort of umbrella term. It's simply any kind of action that is intended to benefit others without necessarily benefiting yourself. And so again, kindness is one version of that. There are things like that are closer to organizational citizenship behaviors, like helping each other out, doing organizational citizenship tasks, things that aren't necessarily going to get you promoted, but just help the organization run, make things go well. And kindness I see as something that's really more, directed at one human to another. And I think it's just easier to talk about than prosociality, which I think not many people know what that means.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Heather, why don't you jump in? I know you have a question.
My question has turned into two. Thank you for being here. One of the things that struck me the most recently in my organization, we've done trainings around gender equality, and particularly within Rotary International, around poverty porn and the white savior complex. And what I noticed is that the people who opt into those trainings kind of already agree with you, and you essentially wind up preaching to the choir, and that's great that you're getting important information out there. But with a new idea, a lot of times the organizations or the leaders that maybe most need to hear it are the least likely to opt into it. So from within an organization or certainly externally, how do you diplomatically suggest information like this to someone who maybe could really benefit from it?
It's a great point, Heather. And I think this is kind of, you've outlined a really central issue in our work overall, which is the people that tend to follow the Greater Good Science Center tend to believe in a lot of this stuff anyway. And part of our work is really to expand the scope of what we're doing and to work more at a systems level than at an individual person level. And so my role with Greater Good Workplaces is to bring this science to workplaces all over the world. And in terms of nudging people who you think may benefit from something like this, I think part of it is we are social beings, right? So if you're standing on a street corner and you see a few people crossing, even though we're not supposed to cross, what happens? We just end up following, right? And so because we're social beings, one of the things that we're trying to do is to change the narrative that there's not only one way to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. There are organizations around the world that are just grinding their employees. They have leaders that are pushing hard, and they may be successful financially. But we're trying to create a new narrative in the United States that there is another way to succeed, and that this idea of kindness is not just a feel good, it actually can affect your bottom line. And so one of the things I would say is have one of your folks come to a webinar we're doing about this next week. We'll share the link here, and just to see that there's some real science behind this. And there are other CEOs that really believe in this, lead this way, and they have very successful companies.
Thank you.
Sure.
So one question in the chat actually has to do with differences between how we look at Silicon Valley companies in particular, right? And we think about the driven companies of like the early days, the 70s, 80s, and they weren't necessarily talking about kindness as a term. Is there something about Silicon Valley as it is now that is notably different in terms of how it seeks success, and especially along the lines that you are describing with generational differences with workers?
Yeah, that's a good question and a big one. I actually recently talked to a researcher that wrote a book that I believe is called Eat, Pray, Code, and is about Silicon Valley of maybe 5 years ago, before the pandemic, and how Silicon Valley was really working to focus on meaning and purpose and to offer everything inside the walls of their campuses. So, currently it seems to be we're in a moment where a lot of those companies are trying to reduce headcount. And so the idea of kindness and employee engagement is not as prominent as it once was. Um, and what we're trying to focus on is not just on short-term quarterly earnings, but on long-term organizational success.
Mm.
And there's a lot of studies to show that when you just burn through employees, that's going to cost you a lot of money to burn through employees. And so if you're interested in long-term success, these are the kinds of things that can really help. If you're really focused on those quarterly numbers, yeah, it may make sense, as a lot of Silicon Valley is doing right now, is to cut any kind of programs that focus on employee well-being, and lose headcount and really become more profitable that way. We just don't think that's a good long-term solution.
So I remember someone telling me about 5, 6 years ago that one of the reasons Google, I think it was, would contact people that had left 6 to 9 months out of leaving Google, and asking them how they're doing, if things are working out as they'd hoped, would they consider coming back? And part of that had to do with the cost of bringing somebody brand new in.
Yep.
That there was a figure of something like $150,000 just to train a new engineer for a Silicon Valley company. So the numbers are not small here. I would imagine that they are large enough that you don't have to think too long term to see the financial benefits of thinking a little bit more strategically about how to make sure people are happy in their setting.
Absolutely. And of course, there's not just the financial benefits. One of the things I learned in talking to the CEO, Dennis Ring, um, he, one of the things he would do is he would go, he had a factory of folks making chocolate from all over the world. So there were mostly women from all over the world in his factory. And he made it a point to learn every single person's name and a greeting in their language. And there were maybe 30, 40 languages represented there, some that are spoken in, a small village in Guatemala. I mean, all kinds of languages. And he made it a huge point to connect with those folks, learn their languages. And he just found that there was a lot more personal fulfillment for him as a CEO. And of course, more performance. People wanted to really be there for him and the company. So yeah, profitability is important, and there are so many other benefits of this kind of thing, including things like creativity and innovation. There's so many studies to show just that people who are feeling grounded, connected, and joyous at work are more creative at solving problems. A lot of research around that.
So as you go into a company, like so if you or one of your team will be there as a consultant,
Mhm.
can you give us a flavor of the kind of things that we talk about? I mean, I can imagine that some of the things that we've talked about just in the last 15 minutes are the kinds of things where you can imagine a bunch of employees standing around saying, "Oh, I hope the leader is listening to this," right? Uh, as opposed to something that really asks everyone to engage in certain kinds of approaches to work and kindness in their work that will be beneficial for everyone. How would you characterize the kind of activities that your organization does when consulting with a company?
Sure. I think it's really important to make this easy for people to do, because I don't know about you, but none of us have time, right? And so the idea is for leaders, we try to give them very easy hacks that they can try on Tuesday. For example, in your next team meeting, just start your meeting by appreciating the person to your left, and they appreciate the next person, and we'll just go around the table. And I remember doing this with a team years ago. And the third person that got appreciated just broke down into tears and said, I've been working here for 12 years and I have never felt appreciated. And I didn't even know you guys liked me. It was just such a difficult thing to hear, but also so simple to do. This took 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting, and markedly changed the nature of that meeting. So there are little sort of meeting hacks that we work with, all the way to things like a gratitude intervention, where we try to make gratitude go viral inside your organization and measure burnout and engagement levels before and after. So a company might come to us and say, we've got a lot of burnout, we've got low engagement, and we'll say, here's a gratitude intervention. Let's scale that inside your company, and we'll measure burnout and engagement afterwards and see what effect it has.
So are the clients of your program typically medium to large scale companies, or do you work with smaller scale companies as well? Do you work with service organizations? Are there kind of those folks out there who have found a lot of good in the stuff that you guys put out that might not be part of the conversation we've had up to this point?
Yeah, it's been a wide range of companies and organizations, I have to say, because we've got 1 million eyeballs from around the world every month on our articles and podcasts. It can range from a Buddhist monastery in Hong Kong. We're working on a 5-year program with them, all the way to a biotech company in Silicon Valley, or a university, or yeah, lots of different kinds of organizations that engage with us, and more in tech, more and more in Silicon Valley.
You mentioned the million sets of eyeballs, right? In one respect, it sounds like you're part of an organization doing something fairly simple, but fairly brilliant, which is by having a free resource that is available, or actually, I might be making a bad assumption in that it's free. A free resource that's available to people all over, you're creating a community that might be well positioned to look at other kinds of offerings that the Greater Good Science Center provides. Is that strategically a part of it? And if so, how has that been communicated so that it doesn't seem simply like kind of a vehicle for paid services?
I see. Yeah, I would say maybe 80% of our funding really comes from grants and things like that. We are a nonprofit, and we do lots of work that is grant funded to bridge differences. We've got a whole team that is focused on bridging differences across political divides and all other kinds of divides. We've got teams working in the schools to make basically social emotional learning a part of schools, and basing it on the science of what we do. And my work is to bring it into workplaces. And unfortunately, not a lot of that is grant funded. And so we do charge companies that want to bring us in, but it really kind of helps support the whole operation, which I would say 90% of the stuff on our website and our podcasts and things like that are all free, grant funded resources that are free to the public.
Can you talk about that range of offerings a bit? We have members of our club who are all over the world. The flexibility of our model of a service club, online, asynchronous, means that it's going to be geographically distributed as well, and we take a lot of pride in that. Um, if they are looking up the Greater Good Science Center
Mhm.
and maybe following the links on the pages or anything like that, what are the kinds of things they'll encounter? Like you mentioned podcasts, for example. What are the kinds of themes that the podcasts seek to address? What are the kinds of articles they would find in the monthly newsletter?
Sure. The podcast is called The Science of Happiness, and that is all as it sounds like. It's all things related to happiness, and it's really for a broad audience of folks. On the side of the articles on Greater Good magazine, um, we have a huge amount of topics that you can really connect with. So if you were to go to our magazine, you'll see a whole series of topics such as gratitude, resilience, compassion, awe. These kinds of topics that where we really curate the science on those topics and provide articles, resources, podcasts, etc. on those. We also have a part of our website that's called Greater Good in Action, GGIA. And that is essentially taking the science and offering you short little practices that you can try at home. And it's like, here's the practice, here's the science behind it, and here's how to do it. So Greater Good in Action is a great resource for that. And on the kind of workplaces side, we focus really on 3 ways of delivering that. One is through keynote presentations, another is workshops and retreats. So your team could have a retreat facilitated by our group. And then the last is organizational consulting. So we have worked with Pixar on their movies Inside Out and Inside Out 2 on the nature of emotions. We have worked with Facebook on the emojis that they include in their app. And now we're working more with organizations on bringing well-being to the workplace.
So a lot of good comments have come through the chat, about company's most vital asset being their employees that Shags was talking about. Mike mentioned the damage done by very short-term thinking about these things as well. Tell us a little bit about the founders, the leadership of the Greater Good Science Center, and how their perspectives, perhaps even demographically, have been helpful or challenging in terms of getting into more corporate spaces.
Yeah, I would say, in the first 10 years or so, the Greater Good was really a partnership between positive psychology scientists and journalists. And so when you put journalists and psychologists and scientists together, the focus has really been to translate the science and to get it out to the world. And so this, in the first 10 years or so, that's been really wonderful because that's allowed us to get in front of those millions of eyeballs that you talked about. When the New York Times wants to know about kindness or compassion or those kinds of things, they always call us because we've gotten into the zeitgeist about that. And I would say in the last 10 years, we have been bringing this science to different audiences, including schools, workplaces, etc. And so on the workplaces front, this is really what I've been hired to do, is to grow that piece of our work. And so we have had events about this. We've had conferences about this in the workplace, and now we're really building out our programs to really make a dent in the workplace, because there is just a lot of unnecessary suffering in the workplace, and we want to reduce that.
Well, I love also that looking at the world that way allows you to step away from the usual political divides as well, right? I mean, successful companies that are built around successful and happy employees, kind of hard to argue against that for sure. So it was a wonderful stuff, and I love the message. Thank you. We're going to wind things down, and then as we always do, we'll hand it back to the speaker for the final word. But for all of you who've taken your time to spend it with us, maybe you're listening to a podcast as you're driving down the highway or doing laundry. Maybe what you're doing is you're watching this as a recording on our YouTube channel or on our meetings archive page at siliconvalleyrotary.com, more easily found through rotary.cool. So you know. We just appreciate that you would take your time to be inspired by the people that we get the chance to talk to and that we have the opportunity to learn from. We hope that if you are someone who is thinking about getting involved in service organizations in your community, you'll look them up. There's loads of good ones. So in addition to Rotary, you'll find the good folks at Kiwanis and Optimist and Lions and all of those great organizations out there, and that you'll look for that service group that allows you to feel the way that Kia talks about when he talks about a really well-functioning and successful company built on systems of kindness. And if you're interested in our club specifically, please take a look from our main page. You can find information about who we are, about how to join, and all of these kinds of things. And if you have questions, just let us know. We're very happy to respond. So, as we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. Kia, for those folks who are finishing up watching the video or listening to the podcast, what would you like them to have clearly in mind as they wind things down?
Great. Thank you, Rushton. Well, I think just a couple of things. I'd love to invite you all to this event. It's happening Wednesday during lunchtime. You can go ahead and take a screenshot of this QR code and it'll take you to the registration page, or use this bit.ly. It's a free webinar about what we were just talking about. We're going to have Dennis Ring on there talking about his chocolate factory and then the work he's done. We're going to have our researchers and our science director, Emiliana Simon Thomas. So feel free to register for that. It's free. It's lunchtime on Wednesday, and it should be enjoyable. Great conversation. And then if you're interested in bringing a greater good speaker or workshop to your next event, just go ahead and scan this QR code and you can find out how to do that. And that's it. And I hope you have a great weekend, and hopefully you'll work in a workplace where you can bring your full self and bring a lot of joy to work, because I think it's time for a little bit more joy at work.
Definitely. And generally online, you can be found at ggsc.berkeley.edu, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I hope folks will give it a look. I hope they will also come back and see us next week when we talk to someone new about how to make the world a better place. Thank you for your time, and we will see you soon.